The four emperors are the most powerful pirates in the world. They rule over the second half of the Grand Line and are the reason why it's so chaotic. At the beginning of the series, these emperors consisted of Shanks, Whitebeard, Kaido and Big Mom. However, over the course of the series, these ranks have shifted to where Luffy, Blackbeard and Buggy are now at the top. Now before we go any further, what is an emperor? An emperor, or the Yonko, are four separate pirate crews that rule over the second half of the Grand Line, aka the New World. To put this into perspective, it's often stated that as a pirate in the New World, you have to either make an alliance with other pirates or align yourself with an emperor to survive. This sentiment is true for most rookie pirates, as even the lower ranking officers in the emperor's crew can take out entire pirate crews by themselves. As for the highest ranking officers, mostly known as commanders, they are some of the strongest individuals in the One Piece world, often having insane devil fruit powers and overwhelming haki. However, it's often stated that the crew of a Yonko don't even compare to the Emperor. In fact, most of the Yonko are considered top 10 strongest characters in One Piece. For context, the Yonko are the entire reason why the warlord system even exists, to give the world government somewhat of an even playing field. But even then, it took the combined forces of the Marines, Admirals and Warlords to just stop one Emperor and his crew during the Marineford War. But what if we were to pit them against the pinnacle of modern Jujutsu, the foremost sorcerer, Gojo Satoru, whose literal birth disrupted the power equilibrium in the Jujutsu world, instilling fear in curses and sorcerers alike. Born with the rare ocular prowess known as the Sixth Eyes, Satoru possesses heightened perception and intuition, enabling him to discern the flow of cursed energy with unmatched clarity. However, it's his signature technique, the Limitless, that truly distinguishes him. Through it, Satoru commands space and dimensions, manipulating reality with its thoughts alone, exhibiting the power to repel, attract, and neutrally alter the fabric of existence. Let's put haki and cursed energy against each other as we assess how Gojo would fare against the emperors. In this discussion, haki and devil fruits will operate as they do in One Piece, while abilities and cursed energy will function according to the rules of Jujutsu Kaisen. For instance, Logia users will retain their passive ability of intangibility. Now if you enjoy this video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to me, and remember, it's completely free, huh? Before delving into the matchups, it's crucial to address a looming question. Can any of these characters even touch Gojo? Now I'm gonna start with Shanks, and I'm going to cover every possibility to this fight that I can think of, so I'd suggest listening to my reasoning first before commenting. Now, in my previous video where I did Gojo versus the Warlords, I described how Mihawk, the strongest swordsman in the world, has sword skills stated to directly scale to Shanks. The reason this is important is because in his fight against Mr. One, since he's made of steel, Zoro wasn't able to cut him until he remembers the Breath of All Things in Alabasta, where he could sense some kind of frequency or wavelength from objects such as his swords, the rocks and even steel, almost as if he was able to attune his swords and understanding to his cutting appliance so he could cut anything. As further evidenced in Wano, we learned that Koshiro, Zoro's master, is a descendant of the Wano people, and as you can see, Koshiro even describes mastery of this technique as the pinnacle of swordsmanship, which he states is the power to cut what one wishes to cut and protect what one wishes to protect. And now, given Koshiro's heritage, what Zoro did is quite similar to Luffy's strategy against Kaido to use advanced armament haki to destroy him by bypassing his natural durability. Since we know Zoro's swords never got sharper and there's no evidence to show he got physically stronger, it's been argued that the Breath of All Things and advanced armament haki are the same thing, since the next person to even talk about the application of applying an emission of haki to negate durability and destroy your opponent from the inside was Hyogoro, who for as far as we know has lived in Wano his whole life. Also, on the rooftop against Kaido, you'll notice that Zoro was the only one able to leave any lasting damage to Kaido after his swords were shown to be emitting Ryo in excessive amounts. Now, if Mihawk has this, since he's going to be Zoro's final enemy, then likelihood is he's actually mastered the Breath of All Things already. But again, we go back to the question, is this going to be enough to touch Gojo? Well, contrary to popular belief, Gojo's Limitless isn't actually a physical barrier. The way the Limitless technique works is, it manipulates the distance and space between him and a target. The best way to describe this is, imagine dividing a number in half. We'll start with 8 divided by 2, which is 4, 4 divided by 2, which is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1, then you get obviously 0.5, and then 0.25, and then 0.125, and so you can continue dividing these numbers an infinite amount of times without ever actually reaching 0. That's what Gojo does. He continuously divides the distance between him and a target using his cursed energy so that it never actually reaches 0. So it never actually touches him. Now, in my opinion, this could go either way for 2 reasons. The first being that because anything that Infinity can't directly detect can bypass it, and because Haki emission is something that Infinity has never dealt with, it might not recognize it and it could pass through. Second, it's told to us on numerous occasions that higher output techniques like domain expansion or domain amplification could bypass or neutralize Gojo's Limitless technique. Gojo himself says this during his fight with Sukuna, again with Jogo, and the Shibuya incident in the train station. Gojo says even though Sukuna can negate some of the lower output of the neutral Limitless with the domain amplification, he can't completely negate the higher output of blue and red, which falls in line with what he said to Hanami and Jogo during Shibuya, saying that if they try to negate his Limitless, he'll just make his technique stronger, and when he does that, he overpowers the domain amplification. Earlier in the series, when Jogo uses his domain on him, he asks Gojo that since they're in their more potent domain, if his attacks will reach him, to which Gojo replies, yes. This tells us that not only can domain expansions or amplifications neutralize the Limitless, but more so how, which is by pretty much overpowering the technique. On the other hand, no, because for one, Ryo or advanced armament is sourced from the spirit, which is the JJK verse's equivalent to cursed energy, which in essence is also a form of spiritual energy. And that although Gojo's Limitless does filter through certain things like light and air, the Six Eyes can also see cursed energy, or if you like, spiritual energy at an atomic level. So much so that he can actually see the flow of each individual atom, and that he can also detect the danger of an object automatically based on its speed, shape, and mass. So another way to interpret this is Gojo's brain calculates threats once the brain considers an attack as a threat. The infinity or space convergence activates and stops that, but in order to determine it, it has to have the time to process. And talking of giving the brain time to process, we know for a fact that Shanks scales to being faster than light, because if we're taking the movie Red as canon, then in the movie we see Shanks do things like deflect light attacks from Admiral Kizaru, a man made of light, and then catches Kizaru after he moves back in light form. If we're not, then we know Shanks went to stop Kaido from joining the war at Marineford to intercept Whitebeard, which is important because in his fight with Luffy during chapter 1001, Kaido put Luffy on the highest pedestal where he places him alongside Shanks, Zebek, Whitebeard, and Oden, which appear as the list of fighters he knows he can contend with. And we know Luffy is faster than light speed because he has reacted to, outsped, and perceived light numerous times in his altercation against Kizaru at Egghead. Gojo's speed, on the other hand, which you could arguably scale into 2 different categories, which is Gojo when we think he's augmenting his speed with Limitless, and Gojo when he isn't augmenting it. To put it simply, we know Gojo is at least relative to Sukuna, as he almost defeated Sukuna and tagged him multiple times, who defeated and scales directly above Kashimo, who is able to create electromagnetic waves. Another example that not a lot of other YouTubers I've noticed brings up would be the fight between Mahito and Mekamaru, where Mekamaru uses guided lasers. The reason why this is important is, at first I thought that, okay, if it's a guided laser, would it even be considered light anymore? But after doing a bit of research in physics, the speed of light in a vacuum is considered a constant, regardless of the path it takes. And in certain circumstances, such as in gravitational fields, according to Einstein's theory of general relativity, light can appear to curve due to the bending of space-time. Despite this apparent curvature, light will still travel at the speed of light in a vacuum, and we know Gojo and Sukuna both directly scale above all the special grades who Mekamaru was defeated by. The other category is Gojo, who was speed blitzed by Toji, who's been calculated to be about 3 times speed of light, or Mach 3, which was entirely out of Gojo's perception. So in terms of actual speed, even if we were being generous, I'd have to scale Gojo at Mach 3, just because it wouldn't make sense for someone to be able to move at the speed of light and not be able to see while moving at that speed. So to conclude my opinion on who would take this fight, I'd give it to Shanks. Even if we were to scale Gojo at lower tier light speed, the speed of light doesn't beat seeing the future. It's also been confirmed that Shanks can see 10 seconds into the future, which we see during chapter 1079. This is relevant because, as I mentioned earlier, Gojo's brain has to be able to perceive or detect the threat, meaning you could actually bypass infinity if you just blitz Gojo. What would be the point of being able to perceive or move at light speed if you never even see it coming? You might ask, but what if Gojo decides to use the unlimited void? Well, we know unlimited void creates a space where all forms of energy are nullified and absorbed, and overloads the target's mind with information at an infinite speed, effectively applying a stun lock. So fuck everything else I'm telling you right now. If this hits Shanks, it's game. Don't even, I won't debate you on that. But that's only if it hits Shanks. So to reiterate, if given the time to determine the threat, which by the way has to have mass and shape, Limitless can be bypassed. So unless he gets caught off guard, 9 out of 10 times, I'm giving this fight to Shanks. Okay, now let's move on to Monkey D. Luffy. Based on the description we gave for Shanks, this one's a no-brainer. We've pretty much established that Luffy is light speed. We've seen him achieve feats where he not only can react to light but do things like run on air and catch light in Gear 5. We also know Luffy defeated Kaido, who confirmed can contend with Shanks when he intercepted Kaido to not join the Whitebeard War during the Marineford arc. So in terms of speed, Luffy is easily blitzing Gojo. I've been seeing a lot of people say Gear 5 has the ability to reality warp because it's Toon Force. Without going too deeply into it, although I agree that Gear 5 is essentially Toon Force, my issue is that although I can accept he can reality warp, the question is to what extent. The level of Toon Force I'd like to see so that there is no doubt is Looney Tunes level, where we'd see characters basically do whatever they want, whether that be getting thrown into space, surviving a nuke and coming back with absolutely zero damage. And we're seeing signs of it from Luffy, but not enough to say that he can do whatever he likes. Not yet anyway. I also think it would just be wrong to outright fully say that Luffy just doesn't have Toon Force, just because he hasn't shown an extent that we're not satisfied with. Otherwise, I would have just said Luffy would just turn off the Limitless. So before y'all go off in the comments, I'm not a Luffy glazer. He can't do anything. Not right now. He can't do anything he likes, but I think he's getting there. So, conclusion, the Gear 5 of today, or as of the recording of this video, would have to rely on pretty much their strength and speed. So, I'm going to give this to Luffy, literally on the basis that Luffy could also blitz and one-shot Gojo. The only thing that slightly lets Luffy down is that he has terrible stamina and he doesn't kill, so he could beat Gojo, but Gojo would just regenerate. Okay, next, I want to move on to Blackbeard. In my previous video for Blackbeard against the 7 Warlords, at the time I gave the fight to Gojo, and I'll explain why. So first, let's establish what he can do. So for those of you who don't know already, in the One Piece world there are mystical fruits named devil fruits that can give the eater many different and varying kinds of strange and interesting abilities depending on the type and variation of the fruit itself. In Blackbeard's case, he ate the Yami Yami no Mi, which is a unique Logia type devil fruit which allows him to create, control and transform his body into darkness. To add to this, he has an infinite amount of space inside of his body made of darkness. On top of this, if you check the SBS and the wiki, it describes the darkness as having strong properties of gravity and absorption, and that even light itself cannot escape. Furthermore, the gravity is so strong that once something has been pulled in, it can be absorbed into the darkness where it will be trapped forever until Teach himself decides to release it. During his fight with Ace, Blackbeard himself not only said that he'd been doing research on the fruit for years before having it, but also described it as a void which devours everything and returns all to nothingness. We actually get to see this in action a few times where Blackbeard is attacked by Whitebeard's Quake Fruit, which can create visible space distorting cracks in the atmosphere, and Teach prevented it from activating due to his ability to nullify the technique. Now to me, the wording stands out more than the actual description. What I mean is, Blackbeard says he can absorb devil fruit users, but he doesn't say he can absorb them because they are devil fruit users. Do you see the difference? It's a force that can suck everything in. And then in the next panel, he then goes on to say, the other thing that my darkness can suck in is devil fruit powers. The reason why that's relevant is because in this point in the series, Logia or elemental fruit users had intangibility. So to me, this seems like Blackbeard was letting Ace know that being a Logia doesn't make him exempt. So going by this interpretation, he should be able to bypass the Limitless technique also. But what about Gojo's hacks with the Limitless, like for instance when he teleports? Well, officially we've never been given an explanation by Gojo himself, but during the Gojo vs Sukuna fight, while Gojo is surrounded by the endless slashes from Malevolent Shrine, Hakari and Kusakabe are shown talking about how Gojo should be alright as he could use his technique to escape. We get an explanation on how his Limitless brings the concept of attraction into reality, and that when Gojo activates Blue, he creates a negative distance between himself and the place he wants to teleport to. And since negative distance can never exist, the actual distance between Gojo and his destination has to forcibly fill in the void, compressing the distance between point A and point B. And this is the reason why I'd give the fight to Gojo. We've established the Yami absorbs everything including light and intangible elements. Then on paper, it should also be able to absorb things like red and purple. And if you wanted to argue that wouldn't work, then fine. Blackbeard could use his second ability, the Quake Fruit, to counter, which should also be effective considering it allows him to generate cracks in the atmosphere to distort reality that we saw him use in his latest fight against Trafalgar Law, which is effectively a space that allows Law to manipulate reality as well. Which is fine, but Gojo could simply just leave. Like he did against Hanami in their second encounter, he could just go somewhere else, whether that be in the distance or right behind him, and fire off a red or a purple. And even if he can perceive what's coming, that doesn't mean he can dodge it. And even if he could dodge, what's Blackbeard doing about the exorbitant amounts of information flying into his brain during a domain expansion? So, in my opinion, this one goes to Gojo. And lastly, Buggy, future king of the pirates. Bro, I'm not even going to talk about Buggy. He absolutely one-shots Gojo, no diff, no discussion. Argue with your mama? No, I'm joking. I mean, I don't think I need to explain, but for the JJK fans who've never watched One Piece, Buggy's pretty much fodder. There's nothing he's done in the series to show he could even hold a candle to Gojo. The most I could defend is speculate that he can cut atoms based on the report from the Marines, but who cares? Limitless can infinitely protect Gojo at a cellular level, and if atomic is the smallest Buggy can chip himself down to, Gojo's purple could also wipe out things at an atomic level. So I don't think there's much to be said there really. And this is why I said Gojo versus the 4 emperors is a wipe, because Shanks by himself decimates Gojo. Not necessarily just because of the Conqueror's and advanced armament coating, meaning he doesn't even need to touch Gojo. And between Luffy and Blackbeard changing the environment or using Black Vortex to nullify Limitless and blitzing him, bro is cooked. But listen, if you enjoyed this video and if you stayed to the end, you might as well subscribe to my channel at this point. My channel is struggling, so join the crew, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I didn't do all the Yonkos in this video because between editing, recording and writing, this can take hours sometimes, but if I could get, I'm going to say 50 subs on this and maybe 100 likes, I could make a part 2 for the other Yonko, if that's something you'd want to see. But until the next time, peace.